Namam Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prishtaya Bhutale Srimati Bhakti Vedanta Swami Iti Namane Namaste Saraswati Devim Gaudavani Pachadane Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Desha Tarane Om Ajnanathimrandasya Gananjana Shalakaya Chakshuna Unmalitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. I was born in the darkness of ignorance, and my spiritual master opened my eyes with the torchlight of knowledge. I have my humble obeisances at his lotus feet. Today is a very auspicious day, super auspicious, incredibly auspicious. Why? It is because Srila Prabhupada, he appeared in this world to give us all real and true life. Now I would like to just narrate very briefly an incident that occurred in my life before I even came to the International Society for Krishna Consciousness, and how Srila Prabhupada truly rescued me from a life of emptiness to a life of fullness. And I'm so grateful to him because he did this. Had he not come to America, then I would have been just a Ashtanga yogi who can chant Om and enter into the light, but I would never know anything about the love of Krishna. So the story starts in 1958 when my previous spiritual master gave a course called the Self-Realization Course. It was basically based upon the Srimad Bhagavatam, but he did not have a book in front of him. He had written down all the translations, maybe some of the purports, on notepaper in his own penmanship. So that course, it was called the Course in Self-Realization. And it lasted for 2 years. And although the subject matter was interesting, when he came to the 10th canto, I became especially interested. Something was triggered, obviously from my previous lives, a deep, abiding, compelling, mesmerizing interest in Krishna. The more he spoke about Krishna, the more I wanted to know about him. I should further mention that around the studio, there were many pictures of Krishna, and I did not know too much about Krishna until he began to narrate the numerous pastimes of Krishna, such as his appearance and his activities in destroying the demons, his relationships with the gopis and gopas, Mother Yashoda, Nanda Maharaj, and all of those were so rich and so tasty, so deep and palatable. Finally, when the course ended, I asked my spiritual master of that time, I would like to know more about this because I would like to really develop worship of Krishna. I would like to know more about the process of worshiping him and the regulations and rules that are a part of that. And his reply was that when it is time for you to learn about those things, I'm sure Lord will provide that type of information. So I was expecting him to give me that information. But he really was more of a jnani and an Ashtanga yogi, which means that he was more interested in the more mechanical aspects of yoga, moving the energies, the prana, into the base of the spine and raising the kundalini from chakra to chakra and all this kind of thing. And the knowledge was primarily jnani, that we are all the light, and it is our business to we have come out of that light and we must merge back into it. And of course there were classes in which we were taught how to meditate, how to concentrate, how to focus and center, and how to arouse these deeper energies. However, for years, because this was 1958, for years I kept wondering, well, I really want to know more about Krishna. It was in my mind. And I kept wondering, is he ever going to tell us more about Krishna? And whenever I would pose the question, he said, when it's time for you to learn about Krishna, you will find out. Well, I came to the realization at some point that he really didn't know very much about Krishna, except what is in the books, but not the deep underlying aspects of how to develop love for Krishna, how to become absorbed in Krishna, how to sacrifice for Krishna without really the sense of sacrifice, how to glorify Krishna, how to become absorbed in his pastimes, and all of these type of things that we learn about here through the glorious teachings of Srila Prabhupada. So, as I said, that was a hunger, an unfulfilled hunger that I had, and it was there. And I was wondering, is it ever going to be fulfilled? Well, lo and behold, in 1975, I received a letter from Brahmananda, who passed away recently, and he offered me a full Macmillan Bhagavad Gita, free. He says, you just let us know and we'll send it. They were on 26 2nd Avenue, I think, at that time, or maybe they had moved to Brooklyn, yes. So I said, sure. I thought he was just joking with me. It's a big book like this, over almost 1,000 pages. So sure enough, the book came. And I went through this, and wow, I said, this really looks interesting. I didn't understand it fully, because after all, I was a bit of a Mayavad. See how you can understand devotion. But the desire was there. So anyway, the book came, and then I turned, and I came to near the back of the page, and there was an advertisement for Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. A book, 2 books, 2 volumes with a silver cover. Some of us remember those beautiful books, tall. So I immediately ordered them, and then I started to read them, and I fell in love. With every chapter that I read, it just became more and more fulfilling, more satisfying. This was the answer to my prayer. Srila Prabhupada was answering all the questions that I had, which my previous spiritual master could not answer. You know, who is Krishna? Why he came to this world? What is his purpose here? Things of that sort. And I said, this is just delicious. It's delightful. It's so spiritually edifying and fulfilling. And so I kept reading and reading. And finally it brought me to the point where I wanted to be in that world of Krishna consciousness with a teacher who could actually deliver me, can take me, could direct me into that world. And I felt completely confident in reading this. And at that time, just at that time, ISKCON had a 12-story building on 55th Street, which was fairly near my ashram. I had a 4-story building. And so I went and I visited some of the devotees there and discussed the whole matter with him. And then I found out more, that these devotees were speaking such incredibly beautiful things about the Supreme Lord, which is what I wanted to hear about. And everything in that book, the Krishna book, was that 10th canto that I had learned about in 1958. And it was the fulfillment of my prayer, the fulfillment of my desire. Well, it didn't take me long to decide that I would start Krishna consciousness. And mind you, I was a sannyasi at that time for at least 3.5 years, a Mayavad sannyasi. I'm probably the only ISKCON devotee who has both sannyas Mayavadi, the Vaishnav Mayavadi, Vaishnav sannyas and Mayavadi sannyas. Not that that's anything to brag about, but at least I've had a full observation of both, and I can tell you clearly that what we teach here is something not only extremely desirable, fulfilling, deeply satisfying, and if we follow those instructions that Srila Prabhupada has given us in his books, productive of the greatest benefit, the greatest boon, the greatest blessings, and the greatest joy, the greatest peace, the greatest ecstasy, the greatest of complete, true, deep real happiness that I could never get from this Mayavada. I was peaceful there. Yes, I was calm there, and I was what you might call, in a passive way, joyful, but not in the dynamic way that Krishna consciousness provides us. So therefore, Srila Prabhupada coming, when he came, he was ill on the Jaladuta. Most persons would have just turned around and said, go back to India. But he was so dedicated to serving Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati. He wanted to make this philosophy about Krishna, the pastimes about Krishna. He wanted everyone in this world to love Krishna. And as a result of him sticking and staying and bearing the difficulties, tolerating the problems, the pressures, the tribulations, bearing that for whom? For all of us. Therefore, out of this appreciation, I feel ever beholden, ever indebted, ever dedicated to Srila Prabhupada, because, as I said, he gave me a life. And just before I left where I was in 1976, I was wondering, what am I going to do? What kind of service will I do? And Krishna flashed it through my mind. Well, you were trained at the university in radio broadcasting, radio drama. Well, you can take all of these different stories and you make them into dramas. I said, well, that sounded interesting, but how am I going to go about doing that? Well, it took 8 years of going through one engagement to another, and finally in 1984, Vaibhavi Charu's wife came over to me. They had a radio station up in Utah, and they asked if I would like to do some radio broadcasting. And sure enough, I had my prayer was answered. I got a chance to do just that. I take all of these different stories in Krishna book and transform them to dramatic presentations, which were then put on radio. And all the Mormons, they were listening to that, plus my Ramayana and a number of others. And at first, they just thought it was like science fiction. But then as they began to hear the philosophy, it had such depth and such basis and such strength and substance to it, they realized this is much, much, much more. It is not science fiction. It is not fiction. It is fact. It is everything that a person needs. And when I would discuss these things with people, when I would go up to Utah, most of them were all Mormons, and they had many were very pious, and they actually enjoyed and loved the philosophy. And therefore, I just want to say that my life is so completely indebted to Prabhupada for writing those books, giving me an engagement, giving me a life, and helping to share what was in those books with others in a dramatic form, for which I never stopped receiving in the form of letters and emails and so forth, and phone calls for people who get absorbed into those pastimes, because without Srila Prabhupada writing those books, I would just be hanging with my tongue out, wondering, what should I do? How can I serve? And that's it. Thank you all very much.
Hare Krishna Maharaj, thank you very much. Rambaru Mataji.